Hi everyone, I'm Jag, a type designer from Iloilo, Philippines, and today we will be talking about Baybayin in fonts. In the process of reviving an ancient script Baybayin, how do type designers develop their fonts at an age when the entire Philippines predominantly uses Latin? We'll cover the usual techniques, as well as personal experiments with Baybayin support in font production. Baybayin is one of the Philippines' beautiful native scripts. Geographically, the writing system was widely used in Luzon and other parts of the country before the Spanish colonization. It is categorized as an abugida, a segmental writing system in which consonant vowel sequences are written as units. When in an alphabet, we would have distinct symbols to represent individual sounds. In an abugida, this could be represented by a single glyph. In Baybayin, we have these base characters, or mga titik, each representing consonant sounds ending with a vowel A in its basic form. To modify the ending vowel sound, we add marks or mga kudlit, either above or below the base character, to represent the I or E sounds or U or O sounds respectively. There are only three vowels originally, A, I, and U, and the vowel pairings that we see here were commonly interchangeable. For instances where words begin with a vowel, Baybayin also has independent vowel characters, or simply patinig. Vertical lines are used as punctuation marks, or bantasan, with a single line denoting a pause, and two lines for a stop. These are all the characters used in traditional Baybayin, dubbed by the present community as B17. The font here is Tagalog Doctrina 1593, a revival from the earliest documented form of Baybayin by Paul Morrow, a Canadian with an interest in Filipino culture and one of the first adopters of Baybayin in fonts. Baybayin has a golden rule. Kung ano ang bigkas, siya ang baybay, which translates to spell it the way you say it. Let's take a look at this example. We have here the word see. Most people would erroneously write Baybayin like this, just by following a word's exact spelling and calling it a day. However, we need to note the compatibility of the language and keep in mind the golden rule before we start. Spelled like this, it would be pronounced sea, which is incorrect. We should also note that English is riddled with conflicting ways of pronouncing words and is not natively suitable to be spelled using the Baybayin script. This is why it is recommended to find a Filipino equivalent of a word before writing in Baybayin. In this case, we have dagat for sea. And this is how dagat would be spelled traditionally, using only two letters, indicating the sounds da, ga, which also refers to mice or rats in Filipino. The question pops up, why is there a missing letter? It was just that this was already an adequate way of writing in the highly literate pre-colonial Philippines. Our ancestors would write on palm leaves or bamboo using sharp knives or pieces of iron and would naturally understand this method of written word through enough context. This proficiency was documented by Father Pedro Chirino, a Jesuit priest, who wrote in his 1604 Relación de las Islas Filipinas, so accustomed are all these islanders to writing and reading that there is scarcely a man, and much less a woman, who cannot read and write in the letters. The statement was echoed by Spanish magistrate Dr. Antonio Morga, who wrote in his 1609 Sucesos de las Islas Filipinas, almost all the natives, both men and women, write in this language. There are very few who do not write it excellently and correctly. You might ask, why do you have these Spanish accounts anyway? This is the Juan Sebastian Elcano ship retracing Magellan's and its namesake Elcano's voyage circumnavigating the world. In 2021, the Spanish ship visited the Philippines to commemorate 500 years since Magellan's arrival. The spectacle garnered mixed reactions due to the fact that the arrival of Magellan centuries ago was the event that sparked the 333-year Spanish occupation of the Philippines. And the time since hasn't even doubled yet. One of the key instruments employed by the Spaniards in the colonization process, was spreading their religion and converting the population to Catholicism. The Doctrina Cristiana, said to be the first printed book in the Philippines, does just that. To better propagate Christian teachings, the book contains Spanish text in Latin letters, accompanied by Tagalog in the Baybayin script. This is considered the earliest example of Baybayin that exists today, and its only specimen from the 1500s. Fast forward to 1620 when Father Francisco Lopez prepared to publish the Ilocano Doctrina, introducing a reform to Baybayin in an attempt to fix the omission of final consonants that the Spanish found confusing. The priest added a cross-shaped diacritic or cruscudlit below the base character to act as a virama or vowel counselor, producing independent consonants. This birthed a new convention in Baybayin, which we now refer to as the B17 plus set or the Reformed Baybayin. The font here is also a revival by Paul Morrow named Baybayin Lopez, retrieved from the Ilocano Doctrina manuscripts. Let's take a look at this next example. We have here the phrase to carry. The next approach could be to use Spanish-derived Filipino loanwords. To carry in Spanish is cargar, which in Filipino is transformed to carga, spelled with a K and dropping the ending R. The cruscudlit is used to spell the middle consonant. But as we can see here, our middle consonant can serve as both T and R, which used to be interchangeable sounds in the native tongue. As years passed by under the Spanish regime, and despite the clergy's efforts to use Baybayin for evangelization, it began to fall out of use by the 17th century. While the ambiguity of the letters and difficulty in adapting to new Spanish sounds might have contributed to this decline, learning the Latin alphabet also helped Filipinos make socio-economic progress during this period. There has been an ongoing revival movement of Baybayin since the 20th century. But while it never really came back as a primary writing system for the common Filipino, we can observe how it tries to evolve over time. In 2019, a proposal to the Unicode Consortium was submitted to encode two forms of the Baybayin rap. One was an archaic form discovered in old documents, as well as a modernized form that Baybayin enthusiasts use today. And here are those forms of the Baybayin Ra, with the original symbol retaining the Da sound. Other vowel counselor styles were also acknowledged, the X as a stylistic variant for the cruscudlit, and the Pamudpod vowel counselor, borrowed from the Hanuno'o script of the Mangyans. All these marks serve the same purpose, to produce katinig from the vowel appended characters. Designated as the B18 plus, this set started the revival and suggested modernization of Baybayin around the 20th century, and is the version that fills the latest Unicode 14 Tagalog block updated in 2021. Let's look at another example using the word percent. We know that native Filipino words are most compatible when writing with Baybayin, and that Spanish loanwords are also suitable to some extent. Writing words from other languages, such as English, is also achievable if you keep in mind the golden rule: spell it the way you say it. However, the sounds may not always be translated accurately using Filipino phonetics. There are many more versions of Baybayin that have sprouted in the pursuit of adapting it to our current orthography, incorporating even more diacritics and characters that we see on these different charts, with varying levels of acceptance from the general Baybayin community. How type designers would encode these characters into fonts is a slightly different story. Let's dive into it. These are labels that I made up to help us distinguish the types of Baybayin fonts that I have observed in my search. First up, we have the Unicode core. This type mainly uses the Unicode specification to encode the letters, which is the standard way to go. We have here the Noto Sans Tagalog as an example. To type the characters, you will need to have a Baybayin keyboard, such as from Google Keyboard for your phone. But for the longest time, we didn't really have the technology available. The Tagalog Unicode block along with Philippine scripts Hanuno'o, Buhid, and Tagbanwa, only became part of the Unicode standard in August 2002 and took some time to be applied in practice. So, how were fonts developed during the early stages of the block's creation? The next type is what I'd like to call keyboard reassignment. In this type, the characters are assigned to specific letters in an existing keyboard as a maneuver. It usually comes with a document explaining how to access the symbols and marks and which keys to press. The sample here is Tagalog stylized by Paul Morrow from 2003. The same README document was embraced by succeeding font makers like Norman de los Santos or Northern X, who has also published a lot of Baybayin fonts early on. Designer Lloyd Zapanta adds a graphic design twist to the document by compiling a Baybayin Fonts Guide PDF for their own fonts. These guidelines were simplified by Lucius Filimos into an Instagram post for the release of their cyberpunk-style font Baybayin Cyber in 2021. This is how what you type in from your keyboard would usually look like for the Type 2 fonts, a practical workaround for the lack of hardware support for Baybayin. With the advent of the improving font handling and open type support in computer programs, we witnessed the third type of Baybayin fonts, giving ligatures. We previously discussed how Baybayin characters inherently come in pairs of consonants and vowels. Ligatures, used to merge two or more glyphs into a unit, is the perfect tool to help transliterate Latin to Baybayin. In 2018, Aaron Amar conceived Matatas One, whose name describes the font's fluency with writing in Baybayin by including ligatures behind the scenes. They were also utilized by Hello Wala in their fun color font, Batsoy color, and by Manuscript, their majestic brush font, BYBYNSKRPT. It is the technique that I have been personally using since I began designing Baybayin counterparts for my Latin typefaces, which I create and export in separate files. Setting up this feature allows users to type words more naturally when using a common QWERTY keyboard. The catch is that the app you'll be using needs to have open type support for this to work. The last type, the stylistic sleigh, are my personal experiments of using stylistic sets to keep both Latin and Baybayin in the same file while retaining the transliteration functionality from OpenType features. The first typeface where I experimented with this method is Bantayog Sans, currently in its 0.2 version on future fonts. Bantayog Sans boasts multiple cases, including small caps and lining caps, as well as an alternate lowercase a. So I ensured that all of these will be converted well into Baybayin once the stylistic set is activated. I've also been improving the recipe in this unreleased font family, Balete. Balete conceals a lot more features and alternates for Latin, so I have been restructuring the code in a way that all of these features are accommodated into Baybayin however much I add. I've also been exploring activating different versions of Baybayin, like traditional Baybayin without consonants, and an additional stylistic set to activate an alternate style of vowel canceller. Like Type 3, this allows for a natural way of typing words, and you will see what you input in Latin before you turn on the stylistic set, which can be helpful for proofreading. The challenge here is that stylistic sets are obscure and may be difficult to locate and activate, and may not even be supported in most apps. Whichever type of Baybayin font you stumble upon, let it be a reminder of how we got here and cherish this heirloom that we once lost as a people. Salamat!